Okay, so you're listening to this deep dive because you want to level up your bar, right? I mean, specifically for those of you who are hotel or restaurant owners,
Yeah.
your bar is a huge part of the business. So,
Absolutely. And it's about way more than just, serving up drinks. It's a whole experience, right? It can make or break your customer's night and really affect your bottom line.
totally. So today we're dissecting some brilliant advice from Maurice, who, he's a real expert in hospitality, especially in food and beverage.
Oh, yeah. Maurice really knows his stuff.
He does. And what we want to do is give you guys some actionable strategies, things that you can actually use to turn your bar into a profit powerhouse
Hmm.
and like a real magnet for your customers.
And he goes into some great detail, too. Everything from the initial, like, how to draw people in to the bar to, the nitty-gritty details of, like, managing your stock.
Yeah, he covers it all. So let's jump right in. One of the first things Maurice talks about is this concept of conviviality, which is kind of a fancy word, but basically he's saying that your bar shouldn't just be a place to grab a drink. It should be like a living space, a real hub in your establishment.
Right, a place where people want to hang out and spend time, not just rush in and out.
Exactly. And one of his key points is that the bar needs to be visible, right? When people walk in, it should be one of the first things they see.
Makes sense, right? Out of sight, out of mind, as they say.
Totally. So think about your own place. Is your bar front and center? If not, maybe that's something you want to tweak.
Yeah, because that immediate visibility, it's like an invitation, It grabs people's attention and might even lead to some impulse decisions to, grab a drink.
Definitely. And Maurice suggests taking it a step further by offering things like aperitifs or, those shareable food options like tapas or charcuterie boards.
Oh, yeah, those boards are so popular now.
They are. And think about it. You're walking in, you see this beautiful spread of, cheeses and meats. It's just so tempting.
And it's a great way to get people to linger. They might have just come in for a quick drink, but then they see the food and they decide to stay a while.
Exactly. And Maurice gives this great example of Le Bouchon des Filles in Lyon.
Yeah.
Apparently, they started putting charcuterie plates near their entrance, and they saw a 20% increase in evening bookings.
Wow, that's
It
significant.
is. So what's your version of the charcuterie board? What can you offer that's visually appealing and tempting enough to get people to stick around?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be fancy either. It's more about the presentation and, making it look inviting.
Totally. And Maurice also mentions Frenchy Bar à Vin in Paris. They work with local producers for their boards, which adds, that extra special touch.
Oh, I love that. Supporting local businesses and getting those unique ingredients.
Exactly. It gives you a story to tell, too.
Mm.
All these cheeses are from this amazing farm just down the road.
People love that kind of stuff.
They do. Okay, so another point that Maurice emphasizes
Mm.
is creating an inclusive atmosphere. Making the bar welcoming for everyone.
Right, not just catering to one specific type of customer.
Exactly. He talks about attracting singles and even people who are, working remotely.
Oh, yeah, like the whole digital nomad thing.
Right. And he gives this cool example of the Hoxton in Amsterdam. They actually function as a co-working space during the day, and then they transition into a cocktail bar at night.
Wow, that's a smart use of space.
It is. It's all about adapting to different needs throughout the day. So maybe there's a way for you to do something similar.
Yeah, like maybe offer a special coffee and pastry deal in the morning or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about something that I know is on everyone's mind, profitability.
The bottom line, right?
Exactly. And Maurice is very clear about this. Spirits have the highest profit margins. Like we're talking up to 80%.
Wow, 80%, that's huge.
It is. So the strategy here is to leverage those high margins on drinks to maybe give you some wiggle room with your food pricing.
Oh, I see. So you can maybe be a bit more competitive with your food menu because you're making a good profit on the drinks.
Exactly. It's all about balance,
Yeah.
making sure your overall offering is attractive to customers.
Right. And then Maurice gets into some specifics about maximizing those profits on drinks.
He does. He talks about this whole premium cocktail strategy.
Oh, yeah, like those fancy cocktails with all the unique ingredients.
Exactly. And he uses Noma in Copenhagen as an example. They have these premium cocktails made with local botanicals, and they're priced at 30 euros with a 70% profit margin.
Wow, 30 euros for a cocktail. That's pretty steep.
It is.
Yeah.
But people are willing to pay for it because it's a unique experience.
Mhm.
It's not just your average gin and tonic.
Or it's something special.
Exactly. So maybe there's something you can do along those lines. Create some signature cocktails that really showcase your bar's personality.
Yeah. And using those local ingredients, that's a great touch, too.
It is. Okay, so beyond cocktails, Maurice also talks about the profitability of wine by the glass.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one,
Yeah.
especially if you have a good selection.
Exactly.
Mm.
But he emphasizes the importance of having a good wine preservation system,
Yeah.
so you keep those open bottles fresh for longer.
Right, because otherwise you end up wasting a lot of wine, which cuts into your profits.
Exactly. He gives the example of Septime Le Cave in Paris.
Yeah.
They can actually serve open bottles for up to 3 days without any loss of quality.
Seriously, 3 days.
Yeah, it's pretty
I
amazing.
know.
So that's something to consider. You know, investing in a good preservation system can really pay off.
Definitely. And what about beer? Any tips on that front?
Oh, yeah. Maurice talks about craft beers. He says that craft beers, particularly those with unusual flavors, can have profit margins of up to 60%.
Wow, that's not bad at all.
No, it's not.
Mm.
And he recommends partnering with local breweries, which is a win-win.
Yeah,
You get those unique local beers and you're supporting your community.
I love that. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about something Maurice calls local adaptation.
Right? So this is all about tailoring your bar to your specific environment.
Yeah.
Understanding your customer base and what they want.
Makes sense. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He uses Tickets Bar in Barcelona as an example. They attract a lot of tourists, so they focus on these really visually impressive molecular cocktails.
Oh, yeah, those are super Instagrammable.
Yeah, and that's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're catering to their audience.
So it's about knowing your customers and what they're looking for.
Exactly. So think about your own bar. Who are your core customers? Are you catering to their needs and preferences?
And Maurice gives some specific advice for different types of areas, too. Like if you're in a touristy area, he says go for those spectacular shareable drinks.
Right, because tourists want those memorable experiences.
And if you're in an area with a lot of young professionals,
Then he suggests having some good happy hour deals. Those after-work specials.
makes sense. Got to appeal to that after-work crowd.
Totally. And here's something important that Maurice brings up. The cost of licenses.
Oh, yeah, that can be a big expense.
It can. He compares France, where a license can cost around 12,000 euros, to New York, where it's significantly less, at about 5,300.
Wow, that's a big difference.
Yes. So it's really important to be aware of the costs in your specific area.
Definitely. All right, moving on to something that might seem a bit less exciting, but is super important. Design and ergonomics.
Right. So this is all about how your bar is laid out. you
Yeah.
know. Is it efficient? Is it easy for your staff to work in?
Yeah, a well-designed bar can save you a lot of time and hassle.
Exactly. Maurice mentions Harry's Bar in London. They actually reduced their service times by 30% just by optimizing their bar design.
Wow, 30%. That's impressive.
It is. And he gives some specific design tips, like the one-step rule for your most frequently used spirits.
What's that?
So basically, you want to keep your most popular spirits, like gin, vodka, rum, within easy reach. One step and you're there.
Oh, that makes sense. Saves your bartenders from running around.
Exactly. He also talks about using modular equipment, like underbar glass washers.
Oh, yeah, those can be super efficient.
He even mentions glass stender models,
Yeah.
which start around 15,000 euros.
So it's an investment, but it can really streamline your operations.
Exactly. And then he talks about maximizing space with minimalist design,
Yeah,
not having too much clutter.
makes sense. A clean and organized bar is a more efficient bar.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to another crucial but often overlooked area, inventory management.
Yes. Keeping track of all that booze.
Exactly. And Maurice stresses the importance of rigorous stock control, keeping a close eye on what you have and what you need.
Right, because you don't want to run out of something, but you also don't want to have too much stock sitting around going bad.
Exactly. He says that good inventory management can reduce losses by up to 15%.
15%, that's a lot of potential profit.
It is. And he shares this example of Le Col Bar in Paris. They check their empty bottles every night to make sure everything is accounted for.
Smart. It's a simple way to prevent theft and avoid losses.
Exactly. And Maurice gives some practical anti-waste tips too, like the 150% rule for stocking. What's
yeah.
this? So let's say you sell 2 bottles of something a week. The rule is you only stock 3. So you have a little buffer, but you're not overstocking.
Oh, that makes sense.
He also emphasizes the importance of using jiggers. Those little measuring tools.
Yeah, those ensure consistency and prevent overpouring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He mentions Little Red Door in Paris. They save 200 euros a month just by making sure their bartenders use jiggers.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is. And then there's the creative aspect of recycling.
Yeah.
Reusing things like citrus peels to make syrups.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of bars doing that.
It's a great way to reduce waste and be more sustainable.
Definitely. Okay, so let's look ahead a bit. What does the future hold for bars?
So Maurice talks about trends for 2025. and he highlights three key areas.
Hit me with them.
So first off, there's a growing interest in unique experiences. People want more than just a drink. They want something special, something memorable.
Right, they want to be wowed.
Exactly. Then there's the trend of healthier options. People are more conscious of what they're consuming.
So maybe more mocktails or cocktails with fresh ingredients.
Exactly. And finally, there's the whole eco-friendly movement. People are looking for bars that are sustainable and ethical.
Makes sense. People want to feel good about where they spend their money.
Totally.
Yeah.
So Maurice gives this great example of the Barn in Berlin. They're known for their alcohol-free cocktails, which are made with things like kefir and wild plants.
Wow, that's creative.
It is. And it shows that you can cater to different needs without compromising on quality or flavor.
Totally. And what about specific drinks? Any trends there?
Oh, yeah. Maurice talks of the rise of sophisticated alcohol-free cocktails. It's not just about offering a soda anymore.
Right, people want something more complex and interesting.
Exactly. Then there's the growing popularity of natural wines. He says sales in France have increased by 40%.
Wow, that's a significant jump.
It is. So it might be worth considering adding some natural wines to your menu.
Definitely. And of course, those zero waste practices we talked about earlier are only going to become more important.
Totally. All right, let's wrap things up with one final but crucial element: training.
Oh, yeah. Your staff can make or break the whole bar experience.
Exactly. And Maurice is a big believer in empowering your staff, giving them the knowledge and skills to be true brand ambassadors.
Right. They should be able to talk about the drinks, recommend pairings, and really create that special experience for the customer.
Exactly. He gives this example of Le Chateaubriand in Paris. Their waiters taste 3 different wines every week.
Wow, that's commitment.
It is. And it pays off because they can then make informed recommendations to their customers, which leads to more sales.
Smart. So it's about investing in your team and giving them the tools to succeed.
Exactly. And Maurice suggests some concrete training methods like organizing mixology workshops.
Oh, fun. Those are always popular.
They are. He even gives an example of a restaurant charging 20 euros per person for a private workshop and making 500 euros a night.
Wow, that's a nice little revenue stream.
It is. And then there's training on food and drink pairings,
Mhm.
creating those unique combinations that really elevate the dining experience.
Like what Noma does with their fermented beet and homemade aquavit.
Exactly. It's all about creating those wow moments.
Totally. Okay, so let's recap. Maurice gives a really helpful strategic summary.
He does. He says the key pillars for a successful bar in 2025 are boost visibility, exploit your margins, be innovative with your offerings, control your costs, and create memorable experiences.
Sounds like a solid plan.
It is. And he circles back to that example of Tickets Bar in Barcelona with their molecular cocktails and Instagrammable design. They're achieving a 40% net margin.
Wow, that's impressive.
It is. And Maurice's point is that with the right strategies, any bar can achieve that kind of success.
So it's a challenge, but it's definitely doable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so Maurice ends by saying that a successful bar is more than just a revenue stream. It's a marketing asset. It's the heart of your establishment.
Right, it's where people connect and create memories.
Exactly. And he leaves us with a call to action. He wants us to think about how we can implement these insights to make our bars the place to be in 2025.
So what's one thing you can do today to take your bar to the next level?
That's the question. Thanks for listening.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.